Yeah, hello. My name is Sandro. I'm a photographer here in Chicago, and I've had a studio here for about 40 years, and I've been a photographer for about 45 years. Originally from Elgin, Illinois, so here I'm, still in my roots in Chicago. Well, I couldn't possibly tell you the day that I met him or exactly when it was, but it had to have been a good 25 years ago that I was working uh, you know, in the commercial field, very, very heavily in the commercial field here in Chicago, and working out of New York and LA. And there was a very intense need for really high quality film processing, color film processing. And there were a couple of bigger labs in town, but someone had introduced me to Osan, which was this boutique lab. It's kind of this guy that was running this out of a warehouse, and it was primarily himself. I mean, he had a couple of other employees at the height of the crazy film era. But Osan always was this kind of this small boutique type of guy, some guy that you could, you come in and you say hi to the boss. You're saying hi to the guy who is actually developing your film. Which the bigger labs, there was no name on the door. It was just a big company name. So I felt like I was working with a friend. Well, I started working on this process, and it was probably in 1997. And it was actually taking color negative and souping it in transparency film, in transparency chemistry, which would kind of twist the colors on the process of the negative, and the colors became much richer, much more saturated, and a lot more contrast. And the problem with souping a color negative into a transparency or vice versa is the film gets so contrasty and so saturated, it becomes difficult to print, to really find a palette that I was really liking for my work. And so I remember giving Osan a chance. Osan, uh, kind of gave me a deal. Why don't you bring a couple negatives to me? Let me see what I could do with your work, and let's talk about it from there. And I remember receiving back these just lustrous, beautiful, heavy saturated, beautiful contrast prints, but it was in this zone that really felt really, really, really good. And it felt like me. It felt like how I wanted my work to be represented. And Osan just nailed it. I mean, he was, first of all, he wouldn't have let me get away with without anything. I mean, Osan wanted me as a client. And I remember he was incredibly kind, generous, and he was a great talker. He had great stories, and he was just, he was a nice guy. He was a really nice guy. Kind of guy you could sit down and, have a glass of wine with or beer and have a chat with about photography, because he loved what he was doing. But he wasn't going to let me get away, so he was going to do some beautiful printing for me, and he did. And we ended up working together, Osan and I, for years and years and years. And I'm sure there was several moments along the line when I had him printing just hundreds and hundreds of prints, and I had these incredible deadlines that I must have just absolutely drove Osan crazy. But he was a trooper. He was a good man. Back in 1990s, I was doing a lot of sports work for a lot of the for a lot of different shoe companies, Adidas, Nike, Reebok. There was a lot of shoe firms coming to me, and there was a lot of editorial work coming my way to shoot a lot of these, big athletes. And I had this style that was, that kind of fit into the 90s. Again, it was this oversaturated look. And it kind of took off. And I was doing work nationwide for big campaigns. And so it started off, extremely busy with the campaign work. But I then got heavily into a personal project that I was doing, and it was this work I was doing in Cuba. And I actually had gone to Cuba for about a month, 12 years in a row, shooting the documentary style of the people, of the landscapes of Cuba. And it was all done in this process that kind of Osan and I want to say that we really partnered together to come up with this look. I had an idea of what I wanted it to look like, but it was Osan that brought it to fruition with his testing and showing what can be done in the zones of what was left on this film, as far as the contrast and the saturation. So Osan would put in front of me a lot of different color tests. And I would really, I'd like to, as much as I'd like to claim the look 100% myself, I really can't. I think it was really, truly a collaboration of working with Osan, and him being so passionate and so incredibly willing to please and wanting to please, that he went the extra miles, not just for me, I'm sure for everybody he went those extra miles. But together we came up with a look that for me was very, very, very sellable, in which I then end up using in my Cuba book, Imagine Cuba. And so right there, that book took me almost 12 years to do. So I know that that Osan and I were working for 2-3 years before that. So it was a good 15, 17 year relationship that we had. And I was always working on developing this look. And it was difficult to print. I know for a fact that it was, sometimes it got very tedious because the levels of information that sometimes got left on these negatives because of the process was difficult to print from. It was very difficult to print from. And Osan always could pull something out of that negative for me and make it look wonderful.
That's like Osan.
He performed magic. He performed magic. He was a magician. He really, really was. I mean, and for him to be, in that lab, sometimes, I wonder if he ever went home. Sometimes, I knew that he was. I knew that he was a great father. I had met his kids, and he had even invited me to his daughter's choir. So I know he had a really deep, deep love for his family. But being a small business owner and being passionate and being the perfectionist that I would call Osan, I would say that he spent a lot of time at that lab. And I'm sure there was nights that he spent the night there because he had to work all night through. To me, I think that Osan's being very humble there when he says that he is not the artist. I mean, I think that, he's not claiming to be the artist, but I think he made a lot of artists look a lot better. And I would believe, in my art that he is an artist. He's not just an incredible crafts person, inside of that lab, but he is an artist. He is a magician. I could only call him the maestro. To me, he was the maestro of the darkroom. He had people sending him work from all over the country. You know, he grew out of just having a Chicago base. He got so really kind of famous with the quality that he was producing, that people heard about him in New York, LA, Cleveland, Minneapolis, all over the country, and they were calling him to use him. And so he's, in my eyes, Osan is the maestro. He was the maestro, of Chicago, of the country, when it came to producing color printing. He's just a genius. I would say today, yes, there's no question about it that probably 80-90% of the photographers are using digital. Especially for the young photographer, it only makes economic sense to be shooting digital because it's so much more economical to produce work. We're all, even us masters are struggling right now, especially during the pandemic, of getting work. And I can't imagine what a young photographer today is going through trying to put food on the table. So it's a blessing that that digital is available to us. But I will also say this, that some of the true masters, the artists, they are still producing color prints, C prints, and Chromes, and color prints for their exhibitions and for their sales. So I think that probably with Osan today, it's probably a very niche clientele. It's a much smaller clientele, but because of what happened in digital world, a lot of labs closed down. They no longer, because they were, they may have had 50, 60, 100 people working for these labs. And when the digital world came in, it just basically wiped them out. They no longer had a base that they could afford to have all these people. Where Osan was always this small, boutique, hands-on everything type of guy. It was him. When you hired CSW, you got Osan. You didn't get, some other, young kids just out of college handling your film. You got a master, who was handling your film. So I think that this made Osan very valuable in the market, and somewhat of an icon. So true artists are probably still working with Osan today. There is always somebody to replace us. Um, I look at the great inspirations of my life. Irving Penn, Avedon, Albert Watson, Auguste Sanders. These are all the photographers that have inspired and influenced me, through my years of growing into becoming a photographer, a real photographer. And I would say that, each one of them have been replaced. Even though they were the maestros, the masters, they have been replaced by somebody newer, younger, who has, just kind of taken the bull by the horns and saying, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to become great myself. So there will be somebody that will come up. I think they'll have a harder time probably, making it, only because Osan came up during the golden age of color printing. He was there when, everybody was having color prints made. Color prints isn't somebody, it's not like black and white, that most photographers had a darkroom in their studios. Most of us had a darkroom, but very few of us, and I wasn't one of them, who would do the color work in my darkroom, because the process is so much more difficult and complicated and complex. So that was something that I would want to hand off to a maestro, and that's why my work went to Osan. But, I would say yes, there will be somebody that will come up and, begin printing for the Chicago photographers that need printing to be done. And if not, you're going to find one in Minneapolis or New York or LA. There's going to always be something. It's just like, people go, well, why are we making film? Well, because there's still people that are shooting analog. There will always be that group of people that want to stay very, very, very pure, to the craft of photography, and they're going to want to shoot film. They're going to want to process that film. They're going to want to look at proof sheets. They're going to want to do proof prints, and then they're going to want to see their prints blown up into whatever size that they want to exhibit them by. So there will be a need. There will be somebody that will fill Osan's shoes, but there will never be another Osan. There will never be another Osan. Until somebody, a vendor or an employee actually doesn't perform their duties, there's no reason to question their capabilities. And I had a dear friend that was a great photographer by the name of Mark Hauser, and Mark Hauser was colorblind. It's a known fact. I'm not putting out anything new that people don't know, but Mark Hauser was colorblind. And yes, Mark was a sensational black and white photographer, but he was also a sensational color photographer also. And I think that if you have somebody else that can be your eyes, or I just think that probably Osan learned to adjust whatever deficiency he had with his color blindness when looking at a print and making the adjustments needed to. He was always very open. I remember, I could go into Osan and we would always spend time with my work and take a look at the colors. And we would discuss what we thought the colors should be. Now, I never in my life knew he was colorblind. And from our conversations, I would have never picked that up at all from Osan. But we would always come up with a solution. And through this conversation and through this, going back and forth and discussing the imagery and with some more testing, we always got to the place where the prints were perfect, absolutely perfect. For me, the most memorable work that I did with Osan was my Cuba work. It was a personal project for me. So it was something that was very, very, very close to my heart. I was very passionate about. I would visit Cuba for about 12 years in a row for a month at a time. So it was a costly process because I had to close down my commercial studio to go over to Cuba to shoot. And so it was a costly process. I wasn't making any money commercially, and I now was in a foreign country spending money, in hotels and food and whatever it took me to shoot my projects down there. So this work was very, very important to me, and it really had to have, the Osan Sandro look to it, on every single image. And there was thousands of images that we produced. I shot over 15,000 images, and I know that Osan would always make me these huge proof sheets. Most people look at 8x10 or 11x14 proof sheets, but we were making 20x24 proof sheets, so that now my 35 millimeter image was almost 3-4 inches across by 2 inches, 2.5 inches, and I could begin to see the image much, much, much better. But I mean, he would do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these proof sheets for me, and I would go through them, and if I had, if there was even the slightest feeling in my heart that this was a good image or I wanted to see it bigger, I'd blow it up. so I could make that decision whether I wanted to include this image in my book. So at that time, Osan was just printing thousands and thousands of prints for me. It was a machine. He was a machine. And then he would fit me in. I think because we had such a good relationship, and he probably considered me, I would think, is probably one of his best clients, that he always tried to take care of me, you know. And I think sometimes Osan did that at the cost of him going home at night and being with his family, because he would know that I would need things the next morning. And that's just the kind of guy that he was. You know, he was just amazing. He was an amazing giver, you know, and I've never worked with anybody in this industry that was like Osan. Well, I can't say that Osan and I ever had a hard time with each other. I think what we struggled at, you know, the most is when Osan got really big and got very busy, you know, because he was such a hands-on person himself. He wasn't going to go hire 5 or 6 people to help him produce other people's work. You know, he had to do it himself. That's just how he was. And I think there was times where he pushed himself to a limit of almost achieving the impossible, which was working for all these clients, including myself, and doing everything himself. And I know there was a couple times where, you know, I had very demanding clients, and being a perfectionist that I am, I would really demand perfection from Osan. And I remember, you know, many a times going over and talking to him, and I could see that poor guy was just exhausted. You know, he was exhausted from the amount of work that he had coming in, and he didn't want to let anybody down. But we never really butted heads. You know, I think that Osan really had tremendous respect and gratitude for his clients. You know, I think that like myself, when I get a job, I know that job could have gone to 5, 6, 7 other photographers. I think Osan always felt the same, that when a job walked through that door, he knew that there was bigger labs, there were other labs that these people could go to, but they came to him, and he was very grateful for that. And he wasn't going to let anybody down. That's just how Osan was. And so we never butted heads, but there were times where I think I was talking to a guy who was very stressed out and very, very tired, and had just overworked himself. Well, you know, he's a messenger, is what he is. You know, he's a messenger. You know, God or our higher powers put people out into the world like Osan to deliver messages to, you know, all of us, especially to the younger population. And I would say that Osan is a messenger of a process, that of a dying art, and he's trying to keep this art alive. So he's you know, he's a messenger of a dying art. Well, I would say, you know, congratulations for still shooting film. I mean, that to me is something that I think is very, very, very special, that you're shooting film, and you are, you know, carrying on a tradition, you know, that goes back, you know, 150 years by still shooting film. And I would ask every single one of you to, at some point, introduce yourself to Osan. And if you can, while this man is still here and still working, if you can have some work done by Osan and just put it aside and keep it for yourself. because this is a very special man. Uh, you're not going to find another Osan in this country who does the work that he does. And to have a piece of your own work um, actually developed, processed, and printed by Osan is really something that you should cherish. But keep what you're doing and never, never stop. And it's photography is it's a thing that has to have deep love and incredible passion and incredible sacrifice if you really want to make it and you really want to be good. It's not a 10-hour day. It's a 14-hour day. It's not 5 days a week. It's 7 days a week. But it's something that will give back to you so much joy that you will in your lifetime you'll really have loved being a photographer. So carry on.